My name is Claire Bennett, and in my brother's sunlit Phoenix kitchen, I was scolded like an unwanted stranger for hogging the shower, while his wife stood there calling me a princess. And months later, I would stand on my own porch, look Melissa in the eyes as she begged, and silently close the door on her apology without saying a word. Before I tell you how it all unraveled, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one. It started in the kitchen. The air smelled like burnt toast and citrus cleaner, and the late afternoon sun streamed through the wide windows, cutting sharp shadows across the tile floor. I was still damp from the shower, my hair twisted into a towel, cheeks flushed not from heat, but from the way Melissa was looking at me. "You were in there for 40 minutes, she said, arms folded tightly over her chest. Melissa Carter, my sister-in-law of 4 years, always looked composed, always polished. Even her irritation had structure. "This isn't a spa." "I didn't realize it was that long," I said quickly. "I'm sorry, I'll be faster next time." Behind her, my older brother Josh Bennett stood at the sink, rinsing dishes that were already clean. He didn't turn around. Melissa let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You never realize anything." That landed heavier than it should have. I swallowed. "I had conditioner in. Water pressure's different than at my place, and you're used to things being comfortable," she cut in. "We're all adjusting, Claire. Some of us actually live here." The words were precise, measured. I glanced at Josh's back. "I'm not trying to make anything harder. I can help with the water bill." "It's not about the water bill," she snapped. "It's about awareness." Josh finally turned, forcing a thin smile. "Mel, it's fine. It's just a shower." She didn't look at him. "It's never just a shower." Silence pressed in on the room. The ceiling fan hummed faintly. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. "I said I'm sorry," I whispered. Melissa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You've been here 3 months, Claire. 3. You said this was temporary." It was. After my consulting contract in Oregon ended abruptly, Josh had insisted I come stay with them for as long as you need. His words, not mine. I had savings. I had options. But I thought family meant safety during transition. "I'm interviewing," I said softly. "You know that," she tilted her head. "And in the meantime, we're supposed to revolve around you." Josh cleared his throat. "Nobody's revolving." Melissa finally turned to him. "You don't see it because you don't want to." Her gaze slid back to me. "You walk in here like this is still your childhood home. It's not." That one hurt. Because she was right about one thing, I did still see Josh as my big brother. The one who used to sneak me milkshakes after Dad said no. The one who promised I'd always have a place with him. "I don't think that," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to steady it. "I'm grateful you let me stay. Then act like it." The words were quiet, controlled, final. Josh grabbed a towel and dried his hands. "Claire, Mel's just stressed. Work's been insane." Melissa shot him a look. "Don't reduce this to stress." I felt heat climb up my neck. "I can start setting a timer," I offered weakly. 15 minutes, 10. She stared at me like I'd proven her point. "See, that's exactly it. You think this is about logistics. Then what is it about?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. For a split second, something flickered in her expression, something raw. "It's about space," she said, "and respect." Josh stepped between us, not physically but energetically. "Okay, that's enough. We're blowing this up." Melissa exhaled sharply and grabbed her purse from the counter. "I have a Pilates class. We'll talk later." She paused at the doorway and looked back at me. "Try to remember you're a guest." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. I stood there, still in damp hair and bare feet, feeling smaller than I had in years. Josh rubbed the back of his neck. "She didn't mean it like that." "Like what?" I asked. He hesitated. "You know, harsh." I let out a shaky breath. "Did I do something wrong?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second I saw guilt. "It's just a lot right now," he said. "Just give her time." Time. That word would come back to me later like a bitter joke. Because in that kitchen, under those jagged shadows, I felt something shift. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to know I wasn't home anymore. And I didn't yet realize that the quietest person in that room was about to become the most dangerous one. That evening, we sat around the dark oak dining table in Josh's Phoenix house, the air thick with forced normalcy, pretending the kitchen confrontation had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. Melissa placed the roasted chicken in the center with controlled precision. "Dinner's ready," she said, not looking at me. Josh pulled out his chair. "Smells amazing, babe." I waited for her to sit before I did. The clink of silverware against ceramic sounded unnaturally loud, like the room had been hollowed out. Josh speared a piece of broccoli and cleared his throat. "It's just stress," he muttered, eyes on his plate. "Don't take it to heart, Claire." Melissa's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not," I said quickly. I don't want to be a burden." The word lingered. Burden. Melissa finally looked at me. "No one said you were." Her tone implied the opposite. "I can help more around the house," I added, forcing a small smile. "Laundry, groceries, whatever you need." Josh nodded eagerly. "See. That's great, teamwork." Melissa set down her fork. "It's not about chores." I felt that same invisible wall rise again. "Then help me understand." She leaned back slightly. "Claire, when you moved in, we said a few weeks, then it became a few months, now it's open-ended." "It's not open-ended," I said softly. "I've applied to 3 firms this week alone." "And until one of them answers?" she asked. I glanced at Josh. He stared at his plate. "I'm trying," I said. "I know you are," she replied, her voice smoother now, almost rehearsed. "But this is our home, we have routines, privacy." Privacy. The word felt pointed. "I stay in my room most of the time." "That's not the point." She folded her napkin carefully. "It changes the energy," Josh exhaled. "Mel, no, let me finish." She turned fully toward me. "You're used to being the capable one, the independent one, and suddenly you're here, it shifts things." "Shifts what?" I asked. Her gaze flickered toward Josh. "Just for a second. Balance," she said. There it was again, something unspoken. "I don't want to disrupt anything between you two," I said quietly. "That's the last thing I want." Josh finally looked up. "You're not." Melissa gave him a look that contradicted him entirely. The silence that followed was suffocating. The scrape of Josh's knife against his plate sounded like a warning. "I thought family was supposed to be flexible," I said carefully. "It is," Melissa replied. "But flexibility has limits." I felt my throat tighten. "Do you want me to leave?" Josh's head snapped up. "No, no, that's not what this is." Melissa didn't answer immediately. She reached for her water glass, took a slow sip, then set it down. "I want clarity," she said. "A timeline, a timeline." The word felt clinical, strategic. "I can give you one," I said quickly. 2 months. That's reasonable, right?" Josh nodded again, too fast. "That sounds fair." Melissa studied me like she was measuring something. 2 months, she repeated. "Yes. And if nothing changes?" "I'll figure something out," I said. Even if it meant sleeping in my car, I didn't add that part. She leaned back, satisfied enough. "Okay." Josh let out a relieved breath. "See, problem solved." But it wasn't solved. Because as we finished dinner in brittle silence, I felt it, an invisible line drawn somewhere beneath the table. I had just negotiated my place in my brother's home like a tenant renewing a lease. And the worst part? For the first time, I wasn't sure Josh was on my side at all. When we cleared the dishes, Melissa brushed past me in the kitchen. 2 months goes by fast," she said quietly, almost pleasantly. I met her eyes. "So does patience." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see." That night, as I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't about showers, or chores, or timelines. This was about territory, and I had just been politely warned that I was standing on someone else's. The next morning, in the narrow laundry room tucked between the garage and the kitchen, I stood over a warm pile of freshly dried clothes, determined to prove I belonged there. The room smelled like fabric softener and desert dust. The washer hummed faintly, mid-cycle, and sunlight filtered in through the tiny square window above the sink. I folded Josh's navy work shirt carefully, smoothing the collar the way I remembered Mom teaching me when we were kids. I told myself this was simple, practical, helpful. The door creaked open behind me. Melissa stepped in, already dressed for the day in crisp white shorts and a pale blue blouse. She paused when she saw me. "Oh," she said flatly, "you're doing laundry." "Yeah," I smiled lightly. "I had a free morning before my interview call, so I figured I'd take this off your plate." She walked closer, her heels clicking softly against the tile. Her eyes scanned the neat stack in front of me. "You folded Josh's shirts too soft." I blinked. "Too soft." She picked one up and held it between her fingers like she was evaluating a defective product. "You do that thing where you smooth everything down and tuck the sleeves in tight. I just didn't want them wrinkled." She let out a small breath through her nose. "He doesn't like them like this." I stared at her. He's never mentioned that. That's because he's polite. The words were gentle, the implication wasn't. I swallowed. I was just trying to help. Melissa refolded the shirt quickly, her movements sharp and efficient. Helping means doing it the way it's supposed to be done. Which is? I asked quietly. Not like you're folding something delicate. She gave me a tight smile. He's not royalty. There it was again. I don't think he is, I said softly. Sometimes you act like you do. The room felt smaller suddenly. I grew up folding his laundry, I replied before I could stop myself. When Mom worked double shifts, Melissa's eyes flicked up to mine. For a moment, something unreadable passed between us. That was a long time ago, she said. Yes. And things change. I nodded slowly. I know. But what I wanted to say was, I changed too. I built my own life. I didn't come here to take anything from you. Instead, I picked up another shirt and folded it the way she had just demonstrated, looser, less precise. She watched. Better, she said. The washer beeped. The sound felt like a punctuation mark. Melissa, I tried carefully, if there's something I'm doing that's bothering you, I'd rather you just tell me directly. She laughed softly. I am telling you. No, I mean, bigger than laundry. Her gaze hardened slightly. You're reading too much into things. Am I? Yes, she crossed her arms. This doesn't have to be dramatic, Claire. I'm not trying to be dramatic. Good, she stepped toward the door then paused. Because drama has a way of overstaying its welcome. The words landed with a quiet finality. After she left, I stood there holding Josh's gray button-down, my hands suddenly still, overstaying its welcome. Was that what I was? The hum of the dryer faded into silence. The house felt strangely hollow, like the walls themselves were listening. For the first time since I'd arrived in Phoenix, I didn't feel like a sister visiting. I felt like a tolerated inconvenience. And the worst part wasn't Melissa's criticism. It was the way Josh avoided the laundry room entirely that morning. No defense. No reassurance. Not even a joke to lighten the mood. Just silence. I placed the final shirt on the stack and stared at the neat pile. It looked perfect. Controlled. Contained. Just like I was trying to be. But something inside me was beginning to tighten, slowly, invisibly, like fabric pulled too hard at the seams. And I was starting to wonder how much pressure it could take before it finally tore. That afternoon, in the bright, over-air-conditioned living room of Josh's Phoenix house, the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, my father swept me into a bear hug so tight it knocked the air from my lungs. Look at my girl, he boomed, his voice filling the entryway before I could even say hello. Dad, I laughed, startled. What are you doing here? He smelled like pine aftershave and airplane cabin air. Same flannel shirt, same deep chuckle. For a second, I was 8 years old again. Safe. Your old man can't visit his favorite daughter, he teased, squeezing my shoulders. Behind me, Melissa appeared in the hallway, her smile already in place. Mr. Bennett, what a surprise. Call me Tom, he said warmly, stepping inside with his duffel bag. You must be Melissa, Josh talks about you all the time. Josh emerged from the kitchen. Dad, you didn't say you were coming. Figured I'd shake things up. He clapped Josh on the back. Couldn't miss seeing my kids. My kids. Something in my chest loosened at that. Within minutes, Dad had claimed the couch like it was his throne. He'd already asked for lemonade and was pointing at framed photos on the wall. Remember this? He said, grabbing one from the shelf. Claire insisted on wearing that ridiculous purple tutu to your Little League game, Josh. Josh laughed. She wouldn't take it off for 3 days. I was making a statement, I shot back, grinning. Dad winked at me. You've always had backbone. I felt Melissa's eyes on me. She sat primly on the armchair, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, smiling, always smiling. And Claire's the one who organized all the neighborhood yard sales, Dad continued. Had spreadsheets at 12, Josh chuckled. Yeah, she was terrifyingly efficient. Still am, I said lightly. Dad looked at me with open pride. You've built quite a career, sweetheart, I brag about you all the time. Melissa's smile tightened just slightly. Oh, I'm sure, she said smoothly. Claire's very accomplished. The word sounded polished. Neutral, Dad didn't notice, or pretended not to. And this house, he added, looking around. You kids did good. It's Josh and Melissa's, I corrected gently. For now, he said with a wink, clearly joking. But Melissa's jaw flickered, just a muscle, brief, controlled. Josh stood up. Dad, want to see the backyard? Only if there's a grill involved. The men moved toward the sliding glass door, their laughter trailing behind them. I lingered in the living room, suddenly aware of the shift in energy. It was lighter, warmer. Melissa rose slowly and began adjusting the throw pillows that didn't need adjusting. "You two are close," she said without looking at me. "He's my dad." "I can see that." Her tone was unreadable. "I didn't know he was coming," I added. "I figured." She smoothed a cushion again. "Josh didn't mention it. He probably didn't know." She nodded once, then finally looked at me. "You glow when he talks about you." The comment caught me off guard. "He's proud." "Yes," she said softly. "He is." Something flickered there, something sharp beneath the calm surface. The back door slid open and Dad's voice boomed again. "Claire, get out here. Tell Josh about that client you landed in Portland." I hesitated. Melissa watched me, waiting. "It's nothing," I murmured. "Go," she said with a small gesture. "Don't keep your audience waiting." Outside, the Arizona sun was blinding. Josh stood by the grill while Dad leaned against the patio table, expectant. "Tell him," Dad urged. "It was just a mid-sized firm," I said, shrugging. 6-month contract." 6 months, Dad whistled. "That's impressive," Josh nodded. "Yeah, that's solid." "It ended," I reminded them. "That's why I'm here." "Temporarily," Dad corrected firmly. "You always land on your feet." His certainty felt like oxygen. For the first time since I'd arrived in Phoenix, I felt seen again. Not as a guest, not as an inconvenience, but as Claire. Through the sliding glass door, I caught Melissa watching us. Her smile was still there, but her eyes were calculating. And as Dad launched into another childhood story, this one involving my disastrous attempt at baking cookies for a school fundraiser, I felt something subtle shift. The house no longer felt entirely hers. For just a few hours, the balance tilted, and I didn't realize yet how much that tilt would cost me. That evening, we gathered around the dining table again, this time with my father at the head, carving roasted pork like it was Thanksgiving instead of a random Tuesday in Phoenix. The mood should have felt warm. Dad's laughter filled the room. Josh poured wine. Even I felt lighter, still glowing from the easy way Dad had bragged about me that afternoon. Melissa set down a bowl of green beans and took her seat beside Josh. "So," she began pleasantly, smoothing her napkin across her lap, "since we're all together, maybe this is a good time to talk about household balance." The word balance hung in the air like a warning bell. Dad looked up mid-slice. "Balance? Yes," she said with a small smile. "I think it's important in any shared space." Josh shifted in his chair. "Mel, it's fine," she assured him. "We're just having a conversation." My fork hovered above my plate. I felt it coming before it arrived. Melissa turned to me. "Claire, have you thought about next steps? Long-term?" The question sounded casual. It wasn't. "I have interviews lined up," I replied carefully. "A couple of follow-ups this week." "That's great," she said, "but interviews aren't plans, they're possibilities." Dad set down the carving knife slowly. "Claire's always had a plan." Melissa's smile tightened. "Of course, I just mean living arrangements, timelines." Josh stared at his plate like it might answer for him. "I thought we agreed on 2 months," I said quietly. "Yes," Melissa replied smoothly. "But clarity helps everyone." I glanced at Dad. His brow had furrowed, the first crack in his easy demeanor all day. "Is there a problem?" he asked directly. "No problem," Melissa answered quickly. "Just logistics." Dad looked at Josh. "Son," Josh cleared his throat. "It's just been an adjustment, Dad, having someone else in the house." "Someone else. Not my sister, not Claire, someone else." "I don't want to impose," I said softly. "I thought I had a little more time." Melissa tilted her head slightly. "Time for what? To figure things out. And if nothing materializes," she pressed. Dad's fork clinked loudly against his plate. "Claire's not a drifter," he said firmly. "She's in transition." Melissa gave a polite nod. "Transitions still require boundaries." Josh finally spoke up. "We're not asking her to leave tomorrow." Fact that it needed clarifying felt like a bruise forming in real time. I forced a small laugh. "I promise I'm not secretly planning to live here forever." Melissa's eyes flicked up. "I'm glad to hear that." The table fell quiet. Even Dad didn't know where to put his gaze. I picked at my food, suddenly aware of how every bite felt like effort. Dad tried to shift the mood. "Claire, tell them about that conference in Seattle." "It was years ago," I said gently. "Still counts," he insisted. "You were the youngest consultant there." Melissa reached for her wine glass. "Claire's very accomplished," she repeated, almost mechanically. But this time it didn't sound admiring. It sounded weighted. Josh exhaled slowly. Can we not turn dinner into a performance review? No one's performing, Melissa replied evenly. I'm just asking practical questions. Then ask me, Josh said quietly. Her gaze softened slightly when she turned to him. We've talked about this. Dad leaned back in his chair. Maybe I'm missing something, but when family needs a landing spot, you give it. Melissa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And when family lands, she said calmly, they eventually take off. The air turned thick again like it had in the kitchen days earlier. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I refused to let it show. I will, I said firmly. Take off. Dad looked at me searching. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But I did, because suddenly I wasn't just a guest. I was a timeline, a countdown. Dinner ended with polite smiles and the scrape of chairs against tile. Josh volunteered to help Dad with the dishes, leaving Melissa and me alone at the table for a brief, loaded second. She folded her napkin with perfect symmetry. I hope you understand, she said quietly. I understand more than you think, I replied. Her eyes met mine. Calm, steady. Good, she said. As I stood and carried my plate to the sink, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't about rent, or showers, or laundry, it was about territory. And tonight, in front of my father, Melissa had redrawn the lines, politely, strategically making sure everyone at that table knew exactly where I stood. Temporary and expendable. That night in the dim guest room at the end of the hallway, I lay flat on my back staring at the slow rotation of the ceiling fan, listening to the house breathe around me. Phoenix nights are deceptively quiet. No rain. No wind. Just the low hum of air conditioning and distant traffic bleeding through the walls. I couldn't sleep. Dinner replayed in fragments. Melissa's steady tone, Dad's tightening jaw, Josh's silence sitting heavy between them like an unclaimed responsibility. I turned on my side, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps in the hallway, a door closing gently. Their bedroom. At first, it was just a murmur. Indistinct. Then the air shifted, and the vent above my door carried their voices clearly down the corridor. Melissa's first. Low, controlled. She acts like this is her place. My stomach dropped, Josh sighed. That's not fair. Isn't it? She shot back, still quiet but sharper now. Did you see the way your dad looks at her, like she's the golden child who just needs time? She's my sister. And I'm your wife. The words hit harder than anything she'd said at dinner. I pressed my palm flat against my stomach, as if I could physically hold something in place. Josh's voice came again, tired. She's not trying to take anything from us. She doesn't have to try, Melissa replied. It just happens. A pause. You light up around her, she continued. You laugh more, you talk about old stories like I'm not even in the room. That's not true. It is. Silence. The kind that says someone knows they've been caught in something they didn't intend. I left my family for this city, Melissa said more quietly. I built this house with you, and suddenly she's here, comfortable, confident, folding your shirts like she's still running the place. I never asked her to fold my shirts. That's not the point. The sharpness of her whisper made me flinch. The point is she walks in like she belongs here, like she always will. I told her 2 months, Josh said. And you think she'll actually go? The question hung there. I stopped breathing. She will, Josh answered after a beat, but his voice lacked certainty. Melissa exhaled slowly. You don't see it, she doesn't need to fight, she just exists and everyone rearranges around her. That one hurt the most. Because I never wanted anyone rearranging. I'd spent my whole life bending around other people, making myself smaller when necessary. I just want my home back, Melissa whispered. There it was. My presence had become an occupation. Josh didn't respond immediately. When he finally did, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I love you. I know, she replied. Then prove it. The words settled like dust in my lungs. Prove it. There was a long stretch of silence after that. No more whispers, no more tension in the air vent, just the steady hum of the house. I rolled onto my back again and stared at the ceiling. She thinks I act like I belong here. But the truth was worse. I'd been trying so hard not to belong that I'd erased myself in the process. And still it wasn't enough. My chest felt tight, not with anger but with clarity. This wasn't about showers, or timelines, or laundry, it was about displacement. Melissa didn't hate me. She felt threatened by the version of Josh that existed before her, the version that laughed too loud, that told childhood stories, that looked at me like I was still his built-in best friend, and I was the living reminder of that history. The ceiling fan kept spinning. Slow, relentless. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, a quiet understanding settled over me. If she wanted her home back, she would eventually make sure she had it. The question was whether Josh would choose to protect me or protect the life he built with her. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to wait around to find out. The next afternoon, under the unforgiving Arizona sun in Josh and Melissa's small but perfectly manicured backyard, I decided I was done pretending nothing was wrong. The roses were blooming too brightly, deep red against white gravel, and Melissa was seated at the patio table, sunglasses on, scrolling through her phone like the world inside that screen was far more important than the one around her. I stood there for a second, rehearsing what I wanted to say. Calm, direct, dignified. Melissa. I began gently. She didn't look up. Can we talk for a minute?" A pause, a slow exhale. Then she set her phone face down on the table. "If this is about last night." "It's not," I cut in softly. "It's about everything." Her sunglasses reflected my own nervous posture back at me. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The metal felt hot against my legs. "I don't want this tension," I said. "I don't want you feeling like I'm invading your space." "You are," she replied calmly. The bluntness hit harder than anger would have. "I'm trying not to," I said. "I stay out of your way, I follow your routines. You follow them like a guest," she interrupted. "Not like someone who understands this isn't hers." The word hers lingered. "I don't think it's mine," I insisted. "I know it's your home. Then act like it." "I am." She finally pushed her sunglasses up onto her head and looked at me directly. "No," she said quietly. "You're waiting." "For what?" "For us to bend." The accusation stunned me. "That's not true. You don't argue, you don't push back, you just stand there looking reasonable, and somehow that makes me the villain." I blinked. "I've never painted you as a villain." "You don't have to," she replied. "Your silence does it for you." The air between us felt sharp, like it could cut skin. "I'm not your competition," I said. She let out a short laugh. "You don't think this is competition? For what?" "For Josh." The word hung heavy. "He's my brother. And he's my husband." We stared at each other. "I'm not trying to take him from you," I said carefully. "I just need time to get back on my feet." "You've always landed on your feet," she replied. "You don't need us." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" I hesitated, because the honest answer felt vulnerable. "The point is I thought this was family," I said quietly. "I thought there was room for me here without it threatening you." She studied my face, searching for something. Weakness maybe, or arrogance. Instead, she found neither. "I didn't sign up to share my marriage," she said flatly. "You're not sharing it. It doesn't feel that way." Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't brittle, it was cold. "Can we start over?" I asked. "Reset, clean slate." She picked up her phone again. "Go away, Claire." The words were soft, almost bored. "This isn't a shelter." I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, irreversible way. The sun suddenly felt too bright, the roses too red, the gravel too white. "I never treated it like one," I said. "But you stayed," she replied without looking up. I stood there for a second longer, waiting for some flicker of humanity. There wasn't one, so I nodded once, even though she wasn't watching. "Okay," I said simply. She didn't respond. I walked back into the house through the sliding glass door, the cool air hitting my face like a different climate entirely. Inside, everything looked the same. The couch, the framed photos, the carefully arranged throw blankets, but something had shifted permanently. I wasn't being pushed out with shouting. I was being erased. And for the first time since arriving in Phoenix, I stopped trying to fix it. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the beginning of something else. That night, while the house slept under the soft hum of the air conditioner, I stood in the guest room with a small suitcase open on the bed and realized I wasn't going to wait for the 2-month deadline. The decision didn't feel dramatic. It felt clean. I folded my clothes methodically, jeans, blouses, a blazer for interviews. No anger, no tears, just precision. If Melissa thought I lingered like fog in her home, I would disappear like smoke. The hallway was dark when I stepped out, suitcase wheels lifted so they wouldn't click against the tile. Josh and Melissa's bedroom door was closed. No voices tonight. No whispers through the vent. I paused for exactly 1 second outside their door, then I kept walking. The Arizona air hit me warm and dry as I stepped onto the driveway. The sky was velvet black, stretched wide and indifferent. I placed my suitcase in the trunk of my car and got behind the wheel. I didn't leave a note. Because explanations are a privilege. The motel I found was off Interstate 17, wedged between a gas station and a diner with a flickering neon sign. The carpet smelled faintly of cleaning solution and old air. The room was small, beige walls, a rattling AC unit, one narrow window facing the parking lot. It was perfect, temporary, anonymous, mine. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress and let the silence settle. No footsteps, no tension humming in the walls. No one measuring how long I'd been in the shower. My phone buzzed. Josh, where are you? Another vibration. Claire, then Melissa's name flashed once. I didn't open it. The buzzing continued. Why are you acting like this? Acting like what? I thought, like someone who refuses to beg. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. The wood was chipped along the edges. A minute later, it buzzed again. Melissa's just overwhelmed. Don't make this bigger than it is. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Bigger than it is. I lay back on the bed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It looked like a continent drifting away from itself. My chest felt hollow, not shattered, not explosive, just emptied. For the first time in weeks, no one was watching me. No one was analyzing the tone of my voice or the placement of my hands. My phone vibrated again. At least tell me you're safe. That one almost cracked me. I typed 3 words, I'm fine, then I erased them. Silence can be an answer. By midnight, the messages had slowed. By 1, they stopped. I turned off the lamp and let the dark settle over me. This wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't emotional, it was strategy. Because when someone makes it clear you don't belong, the most powerful thing you can do isn't argue, it's leave. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the thin motel curtains, pale and unforgiving. My phone was filled with missed calls. 1 voicemail from Dad, 3 from Josh, none from Melissa. That told me everything I needed to know. I sat up slowly and whispered to the empty room, never again. Never again would I negotiate for space in a place that should have offered it freely. Never again would I shrink to make someone else feel secure. I showered quickly 10 minutes just to prove to myself I could and dressed for the day. As I walked out of the motel room, locking the door behind me, something inside me felt different. Not broken. Not defeated. Recalibrated. Melissa wanted her home back, she had it. But what she didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that I had just taken the first step toward reclaiming something far more valuable than a guest room. I had taken back my leverage. And silence, when used correctly, is louder than any argument. 1 week later, in a quiet real estate office in downtown Phoenix, I signed the paperwork that would shift the ground beneath my brother's marriage without raising my voice once. The agent Caroline Hayes, sharp blazer, sharper eyes, slid the final document toward me. Just to confirm, she said carefully, you're the sole owner of the property on East Cactus Road. Yes, I replied evenly. Josh and Melissa's house, my investment. Purchased 3 years ago when the market dipped. I had offered it to Josh below market rent when he and Melissa wanted to start building equity without the risk. My name had stayed on every document, every tax statement, every mortgage draft. Caroline tapped her pen lightly. Once this goes live, things will move quickly, the neighborhood's in demand. That's fine, I said. She studied me for a second. Family situation, I held her gaze. Business. She nodded once and began typing. By that afternoon, the listing was active, clean photos, bright lighting. Charming 3-bedroom in prime Phoenix location. My phone exploded before sunset. Family group chat 12 unread messages. Josh, what is this? Melissa, Claire, call us. Now, Dad, honey, is this a mistake? Another buzz. Josh, EVICITON notice. Melissa, you can't be serious. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to a cafe across town and watched from a distance as the digital lockbox notification pinged on my phone. A showing had been scheduled for the next morning. That evening, Josh finally called from a number I hadn't blocked. I answered. Claire, he breathed, please tell me this isn't real. It's real. You're selling the house. Yes, you said you'd give us time. I gave you 3 years below market rent. Silence. Melissa's voice cut in from the background. Put me on speaker. I heard the shift. Claire, she said, controlled but trembling underneath, you're punishing us. No, I replied calmly, I'm rebalancing. You can't just uproot us because you felt uncomfortable. I didn't feel uncomfortable, I said softly. I felt unwelcome. Josh exhaled sharply. We have nowhere to go. That's not accurate, I said. You both have jobs and savings and options. You're being cold, Melissa snapped. No, I said again, I'm being clear. Another pause, longer this time. How long do we have? Josh asked quietly. Standard closing timeline, 30 days depending on the offer. Melissa let out a sharp breath. Unbelievable. I leaned back in my chair at the cafe, watching strangers pass by the window. This is business, I repeated. Josh's voice softened. Why didn't you just talk to us? I almost laughed. I tried. Silence answered me. The next week moved quickly. Offers came in above asking. One cash buyer, no contingencies. Movers arrived sooner than anyone expected. I drove by once, from across the street. Boxes stacked in the driveway, Melissa pacing with her phone pressed to her ear, Josh lifting furniture into a rented truck. The house looked smaller somehow, less permanent. My phone buzzed again. Melissa, how could you do this to family? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I placed the phone face down on the dashboard, because sometimes the loudest answer is no answer at all. And as the under contract sign replaced the listing online, I realized something steady and undeniable. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't argued. I had simply removed the illusion that I needed them more than they needed me. And that was the part they never saw coming. Thanksgiving came and went without me, and for the first time in my life, my chair at the family table sat empty, not because I was late, not because I was working, but because I chose not to be there. I spent the day in my new rental, a bright white townhouse across the city with tall windows and echoing rooms that still smelled like fresh paint. It wasn't large, but it was mine. Every key on the counter belonged to me. My phone sat on the kitchen island like a live wire. By noon, messages started trickling in. Dad, we're setting the table. Wish you were here. Josh, it doesn't have to be like this. An hour later, a photo appeared in the family group chat. The long dining table. Golden turkey, green bean casserole, my mother's china. And there it was, an empty place setting. No name card, just space. I stared at the image longer than I should have. I could almost hear the clatter of dishes, the polite laughter filling the silence where my voice used to be. I could imagine Melissa moving around the kitchen with tight efficiency, hosting in a house that was no longer hers, because the closing had finalized 2 weeks earlier. They were renting now, smaller place, less backyard. No one said it directly, but I knew the shift had unsettled everything. Josh called mid-afternoon. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, he said softly. The background noise of voices and cutlery hummed behind him. Hey, a pause. Mom keeps asking if you're coming. I'm not. Another pause, longer. You really weren't bluffing, he said. I don't bluff. I know. Silence stretched between us like a rope pulled too tight. She's pregnant, Claire, he added quietly. I closed my eyes. I know, it's been hard. It was hard before, I replied evenly. He didn't argue. You could have talked to me, he said. I tried to, more silence. In the background, I heard my mother's voice calling his name. Listen, Josh said quickly, lowering his tone. Can we fix this? I looked around my empty kitchen. Sunlight pooled across the white countertops. Peaceful, undisturbed. I didn't break it, I said softly. The words hung between us, he exhaled. Happy Thanksgiving, Claire. You too, I hung up first. That night I heated a single plate of leftovers I'd bought from a local deli. No big spread, no forced laughter, just quiet. And for the first time I understood something deeply uncomfortable. My absence wasn't just silence, it was consequence. No one said my name at that table, I was sure of it, but they felt it. The space where I used to sit. The space where I used to fill gaps with conversation and plans and structure. Now there was just air. And air, when it's missing something important, can suffocate. My phone buzzed one last time before midnight. Melissa, we need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I turned the phone face down and switched off the kitchen light. Because sometimes the most powerful response. Letting them sit with the echo. 3 months after Thanksgiving, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in my white townhouse, the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, Melissa stood there with tear-streaked mascara and both hands wrapped protectively around her visibly pregnant belly. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked smaller than I remembered, less polished. The desert sun caught the faint swell beneath her coat, undeniable now. Hi, she said, her voice thinner than usual. I stepped aside automatically. Come in, she hesitated before crossing the threshold. I noticed that, the awareness. My living room was bright, minimal, calm, no clutter, no tension humming in the walls. She sat on the edge of the couch like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. Josh wasn't with her. That told me this wasn't his idea. I didn't call, she began, fingers twisting together. I figured you wouldn't answer. I probably wouldn't have, I replied evenly. She nodded once, accepting that. Silence filled the space between us, not sharp this time, but heavy. I was jealous, she said suddenly, the words spilling out like they'd been rehearsed 100 times. Of you, I didn't react. You walk into a room and people listen. Your dad lights up, Josh, as she swallowed. Josh used to look at you like that, like you were his anchor. He's my brother, I said quietly. I know, her voice cracked. I didn't know how to compete with that. You didn't have to, but it felt like I did. She looked down at her hands. I didn't know how to talk to you. You're so composed, so self-contained. I thought if I pushed hard enough you'd break or leave. I did leave. Yes, she nodded slowly. You did. The weight of that hung in the air. And then you sold the house. I did. Her eyes met mine. Red-rimmed, honest in a way I hadn't seen before. You could have destroyed us, she whispered. But you didn't. I said nothing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small ultrasound photo, sliding it across my coffee table. It's a girl. My chest tightened despite myself. I'm not asking for me, she continued quickly. I'm asking for her. The words were almost identical to the ones I'd imagined in my quietest moments. She deserves family that isn't divided. She deserves to know her aunt. I picked up the ultrasound photo, a blurred profile, tiny spine, small curve of possibility. Melissa leaned forward slightly. I was wrong, she said, about you, about everything. I studied her carefully. The vulnerability wasn't performative this time, it was stripped down, uncomfortable. You wanted your home back, I said calmly. Yes, and you got it, her jaw trembled. At what cost? I stood slowly and walked to the kitchen, opened a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses, brought them back. We drank in silence for a minute. I don't hate you, she whispered. I know. I just didn't know how to stand next to you without feeling smaller. I held her gaze. That was never my intention. I see that now. Silence again, but softer. She looked around my townhouse. You're doing well. I am. I don't want us to be enemies. I set my glass down gently. I don't either. Hope flickered across her face, fragile and immediate. And then I stood, walked to the front door, opened it. She froze. I met her eyes, not cruelly, not coldly, just steady. You wanted space, I said softly. You needed to understand what it felt like. Her lips parted, but no words came. I hope you do now. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Claire, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply stepped aside and gestured gently toward the open doorway. After a long, trembling second, she stood. She walked past me slowly, pausing at the threshold. I am sorry, she whispered. I know, I replied. And then when she stepped onto the porch, I closed the door. Not slammed. Not dramatic, just firm, on my terms. For the first time since that kitchen confrontation months ago, the balance was fully mine. And this time I didn't need to fight for it. The next morning, sunlight poured through my kitchen windows, soft and forgiving, as I stood barefoot on cool tile and looked at the photo on my phone one more time before posting it. It was a picture of a small white house with blue shutters and a wide front porch, the one I'd quietly purchased 2 weeks earlier under a trust. Not in Josh's neighborhood, not near Melissa's friends, but close enough to family without being swallowed by it. I typed 3 words beneath the image, for my niece. Then I hit post. No explanations. No tags. Within minutes my phone buzzed. Dad, is this? Josh, Claire, what does this mean? Melissa didn't message. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked to the window and let myself breathe. The house in the photo wasn't a peace offering. It wasn't surrender, it was structure. Because if that little girl was coming into this family, she would never grow up thinking love was conditional or space had to be begged for. She would know she had somewhere steady to land. An hour later, Josh called. You bought a house, he asked, voice unsteady. Yes. For her, I said simply. Silence filled the line. You didn't have to do that, he finally whispered. I know, another pause. Melissa saw it, he added. She's crying. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of guilt, out of gravity. This isn't about punishment, I said. It's about stability. For who? For the next generation. He exhaled slowly, like something inside him had finally settled. You're still her aunt, he said quietly. I never stopped being. After we hung up, I placed the phone face down and stepped out onto my own porch. The air felt different now, lighter. I hadn't roared. I hadn't begged. I had built. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's legacy. 1 year later, on a warm spring afternoon, I walked hand in hand with my niece through the blooming garden behind the little white house with blue shutters. Her name is Eliza. She's small, stubborn, and already determined to touch every flower despite being told not to. Gentle hands, I reminded her softly as she reached for a rosebud. She looked up at me with wide brown eyes, Josh's eyes, and grinned. I laughed. You're learning. The house had changed in a year. Wind chimes on the porch, lavender lining the walkway, a small swing set in the backyard. Melissa had cried the first time she stepped inside after the baby was born, not from humiliation this time, but from relief. We didn't fix everything overnight. Josh and I had long conversations, hard ones, about silence, about loyalty, about how easy it is to let someone else fight your battles for you. Melissa and I started slower. Coffee in public places, short visits, boundaries spoken clearly instead of implied. I was afraid of disappearing, she admitted once, watching Eliza sleep in her stroller. You don't disappear when someone else shines, I told her. You just learn where you stand. Now, watching Eliza wobble toward the porch steps, I felt something settle inside me completely. This is yours, I told her gently, crouching to her level. A place that's always here. She didn't understand the weight of it. She just clapped her hands and said, Mine, I smiled, because dignity doesn't always roar. It doesn't always slam doors or shatter glass. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it builds something steady and waits for everyone else to catch up. If you've ever had to walk away to be respected, tell me, where are you watching from? And would you have closed the door like I did, or would you have opened it wider? Because sometimes the quietest choices change everything.